Call the Honourable Annette King.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Speaker. The Labour Party supported the Waitaki District Council Reserves and Other Lands Empowering Bill to the Select Committee because we were interested in hearing the submissions, looking at the evidence that was to be provided in terms of 3 pieces of land that were being covered by this bill. And the reason we wanted to look at it closely was because the first 2 pieces of land that Jackie Dean has mentioned, the Palmerston Showground and another lot in Oamaru, there is little or no controversy about at all. But the third piece of land, called Lookout Point in Oamaru, has been controversial. So we wanted to go to the Select Committee to hear the evidence to see whether this particular piece of land was land held in reserve or whether it was a land that had been endowed to the borough of Oamaru and therefore could be used in the way that they wanted to do that. And so we went along with an open mind, wanting to hear what would be said. There weren't a lot of submissions to this bill, but there were 2 significant submissions that I want to mention. One from Mr. Warren Crawford and one from Mr. Barry Monk. Now, they had done a lot of work around this land at Lookout Point, because they were firmly of the view that this land had been made reserve land back in the 19th century. They believed that this land was not Oamaru Borough's to be able to dispose of in any way at all, that it needed to be kept in reserve for the people of Oamaru. So in many ways, this bill has been quite a difficult one because, in fairness to the Select Committee and the members on it, we were seeking the confirmation that this land could be sold, could be subdivided, could be done whatever Oamaru Borough Council wanted to do with it. And I have to say we made a genuine attempt to get all information that we could. At the bottom line is, I believe, what we were provided with after long deliberation and a very extensive search by legal people is that the Oamaru Borough Council does have this land as endowment land. It does not have a reserve over it. I can see why it was confusing, because evidently there was a bill that had been presented to this House which was in effect to make it reserve land. It was never passed. And on that basis, many of those who have been worried about this land were basing their evidence on a bill that was never passed in this Parliament. And so I do want to commend those 2 submitters who set out to get as much information for the Select Committee as they could, particularly Mr. Barry Monk's. Now, it was because of Barry Monk's submission, in my view, where he presented a lot of evidence and a lot of old documents that he had found himself, that made us go and ask the officials to go back and search the records again. And it was Barry Monk's submission that really made us have that rethink, and I commend him for that, because he was able to provide documents we had not seen before. In fact, if you look at the whole issue around the gathering of documents, I think it was rather unfortunate, because there were documents that were missing, there were documents that they had found that they had got from libraries and so on, and when they went back to get further documents, they found that they had been removed, in fact even cut out of old records, which makes people very suspicious. What's going on when you can't find documents, when documents that were there have now been removed from the database? And so we went through, I think, very thoroughly looking to see the status of this land. I think it would have been better for all of the people of Oamaru if the Oamaru Council had consulted better. and we did raise this issue with them around their consultation. It wasn't good, and it has left people very suspicious of their motives. It has also, I think, meant that people believe the council were only interested in hocking off this bit of land so that they could have money to restore their opera house. And there was concern that because the local member, Jackie Dean, had been very supportive of the opera house, somehow she was in league with the council and there was some sort of conspiracy around this. I'm not saying, Mr. Ockerville, that is what that's what we believe, but because of the poor consultation, because of the process, because of missing documents and a lack of clarity, people were rightly left with that impression. And so that is why it was important that we did thorough work on establishing this land's, the legality of this land. Is it a reserve? Was it endowment? Well, I will have to say on behalf of the Labour Party, we are satisfied that this is endowment land that the council can dispose of. We then get to the point of what they want to dispose of it for, and some of the submissions raised the point that this particular piece of land is pretty unstable. In fact, there have been slips up there. They gave us photographs showing that this land wasn't stable, and how could this be used for a subdivision? Now, that's something the council has to work out, and it's not our job to decide whether land is stable or not. But that was an issue that was raised. I am pleased that a number of my colleagues took the time out to actually go to Lookout Point, and I've got two of my colleagues who are sitting here very interested. In fact, Mr. Twyford is going to speak on this bill. He made a special trip to go and look at the land itself, to meet with those who were concerned, and so did Damien O'Connor. And so, as good opposition members of Parliament, I forgot a third person, David Clark from Dunedin, also showed great interest. And so we had 3 Labour members of Parliament, probably more than the National Party. Jackie Dean's no doubt been there, but I'm not sure about the rest of the National Party, whether they even know about it. But I do know we were prepared to uncover every stone in search of what is the appropriate designation over this land. And so, in my view, we have reached the point where we are satisfied. Mr. Speaker, there is one irony I do want to point out, though. If this land is subdivided and sold for the restoration of the Opera House by the Oamaru Council, the irony is we have a bill before this Parliament, a local government amendment bill, which amends the 2002 Act, which says that the council should only be involved in things that councils can be involved in. And you'd have to say, is the use of this land, the money from this land, appropriate for the restoration of an opera house under the government's definition of the purpose of local government? We would say yes. We believe that is. If the community wants it, if they've consulted with the community, if it's a community decision, then that would be appropriate. However, under the National Party's bill, it would not be, because surely an opera house could be provided by the private sector. And so there is this sort of, is it sort of a schizophrenic approach? Maybe it's that hypocrisy approach, the hypocrisy approach to local government, wanting the money from this land to put into an opera house for a council that has been told that that's not really the sort of thing that they ought to be involved in. But Mr. Speaker, we do support this bill in the second reading, and will support it throughout its stages, because I believe the hard work was done on this particular piece of land, the Lookout Point. It was the controversial part of the bill, and I think the Select Committee, ably chaired by the member from Christchurch Central, we resolved the issues satisfactorily.